Hey guys, my name is Bryce Clift. I am a secondary education major at the University of North Alabama. Um, my focus is history, and that's what we're going to do today is a little bit of a history lesson. Um, I'm going to talk about the Vikings. While I would love to tell you all about the Vikings because it is so interesting, I'm just going to actually today just focus on a small part of the Vikings' success and how it happened. Um, if you don't know, the Vikings are believed to have been originated from Scandinavia, which is a sub-region in Northern Europe. Scandinavia was not advanced at all, to say the least. They had no government. They had no monetary system. So the question is how did Vikings become so popular if they were coming from such a bad background? Um, well, the key to that was their ships. I mean, you might think, well, how does their traveling make them so successful? But that is their key to success. They were way ahead of their times in this, and they started out in just canoes that you might be able to buy from your local Academy Sports. That would be that kind of type. Like it just looks like it's carved out of a tree, just kind of like a hollow piece of wood that floats. And they had these loose paddles that, just like you would see today. And as time went on, that wasn't cutting it. So they had to go to long ships, which was a new invention by the Vikings, or dragon ships is what their enemies called it. But these long ships were made of this new clinking system where they would clink wood together, and they would nail the wood together after it was clinked. So it was more sturdy. They could make it any size they wanted to, which was bigger, and it held more men, which means more men meant more rowers, which means they were getting places faster, and so time was more efficient. So on these new boats, there was a thing called a keel. The keel would start at the front of the boat and would swoop down all the way up to the top of the back of the boat. It would run under the boat. It was just this long piece of wood, usually made out of oak, and on the ends of each side were like carved dragon heads. And rumors is that these carved dragon heads were used to intimidate their enemies before they arrived. Like when their enemies saw them coming, they just saw the dragon heads, and it was an intimidation factor. As time went on, these boats were getting more and more popular. They abandoned the loose paddles. They thought that they could get bigger paddles that were just linked to the side, and when they would row, it was just a bigger paddle, which meant it was pushing more water. And so there's all these guys pushing these bigger paddles, and they're just like getting places faster. And then they added the sail to it, which meant they were just moving even faster than they already were. So like as time was going on, these ships were getting more and more efficient, and they were becoming more advanced. So the advantage of these ships, let's see, they were long and narrow, so that meant that it was easy to maneuver. So they could rush up on a bank, attack somebody, and get out of there, and with little to damage done because their ships were so efficient. Another way this is efficient is the boat is symmetrical from the front to the back. So the front was built just like the back, so they could pull up on a beach, attack somebody, get back in their ship, and pull out just the way they came in without having to turn their boat like a 360. So they could rush, attack, rush, leave, and be out of there in no time. So like they were already ahead of their time in that. And then there was the fact that these boats were so light, they could go in the shallowest of waters. So they could go places that other boats couldn't just because they were made to. And so that's just another advancement that helped them along the way. And so all this in short, just to tell you how important these ships were to these men, to these Vikings. When Vikings would die, they would either be cremated. That was a popular funeral procession or whatever. Or they would be buried in their ships, like with their ships. And the thought process behind this was if they're buried with their ships, they would get to carry their ships to the next life or the afterlife or their whatever they thought was going to precede them after death. And you got to think about that. They're burying ships that cost money. They cost real money that other people could use, and they're taking them under the ground with them just so they could have them in the next life or the chance to have them in the next life. That's just that's just a small snippet of how much the ships meant to them. And we talked about some of the advantage of the ships and how they were made. And it's hard to believe, but that was a secret to success for the Vikings. Hope you enjoyed it.